Have you ever felt like you were living through a time of just profound shift? A half century where everything seemed to be getting redefined.
It's a really powerful thought, isn't it? Like the ground is constantly moving beneath your feet.
Exactly. And imagine that feeling, but maybe amplified, transforming, well, everything about American life.
Yeah, we're talking about a period where the world just seemed to speed up like never before. It demanded new ways of seeing things, thinking about things, and crucially for us today, new ways of writing about them.
And that's our deep dive today, American literature from 1900 to 1950. We're looking at this as a time of just monumental, unprecedented change.
And the literature from this period, it was like a mirror reflecting all that change, but sometimes it felt like it was actually driving it, helping people figure out what it meant to be American then.
So for this, we've gathered quite a bit of material, great sources detailing the era, the writers, and later on, we'll really get into one specific, very powerful novel.
Right. Our goal, as always, is to kind of give you that shortcut to feeling really informed. We want to uncover those surprising bits, the essential insights, but without, drowning you in information.
Okay, let's dive in. Let's step into the first half of the 20th century. So part one, let's really try and grasp the sheer scale of change in this half century, 1900 and 1950. People argue it might be the most transformative 50 years in history.
Yeah.
Can you even picture living through that constant upheaval?
It's pretty staggering to think about. And the why behind it all is complex. First, you've got this explosion of technology, right? Things that completely reshaped daily life.
Like the car, the airplane.
Exactly. Radio, widespread electricity. These weren't just novelties. They changed how people lived, worked, communicated, distances shrank, horizons expanded, fundamentally.
And at the same time, society itself was demanding change.
Yeah, huge demands. More rights, new ways of governing. Old systems were being challenged everywhere. Think about workers' rights, women's suffrage. New social ideas were really bubbling up.
And it wasn't just external stuff, was it? Something shifted inside people, too.
That's a key point. There was this profound shift in the human psyche. People started wondering more about themselves, their inner lives, their place in this increasingly complex, maybe even confusing world.
Like the old answers just didn't fit anymore.
Precisely. New anxieties, new questions about who we are, what our purpose is, and globally, countries breaking free from old empires, redrawing maps.
People moving away from monarchies.
Right, trying out new forms of government democracy, socialism, and, well, darker paths too, as we know. And voting rights were expanding in many places, bringing more voices in. It was constant change, constant reevaluation.
But it wasn't all progress and excitement. There's a very dark backdrop.
Oh, absolutely. 2 world wars, unimaginable human cost, violence, death. It was a brutal time, too. And literature became one of the key ways people tried to capture that, to make sense of it.
So, for you listening, just try to imagine that feeling. Constant flux, the old certainties crumbling, the new rushing in, often frighteningly.
Yeah.
How would you, as an artist, maybe try to make sense of that?
And it's right in that crucible of change that we see new literary trends emerge. Let's start with naturalism.
Okay, naturalism. It came out of realism, but took it further.
Yeah, you could say that. It aimed for an even more realistic, sometimes brutally unflinching look at contemporary life, holding up that mirror, warts and all.
What was its core idea?
Fundamentally, it was characterized by a pessimistic view of humanity and human existence. It was a pretty stark contrast to, say, more romanticized views of life that came before.
So, less about heroes shaping destiny, more about
characters being at the mercy of forces beyond their control, things like heredity, their environments, social conditions. There's this sense of determinism, like individual will often just wasn't enough against these huge, overwhelming forces in this industrializing, sometimes brutal world. You feel that weight in the stories.
heavy stuff. A sense of being trapped, almost. But then alongside this, or maybe we're reacting to it, you get modernism, which really shook things up, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. Literary modernism, it's this huge, incredibly rich period, mostly between the world wars in Britain and America. And it's all about diversity, experimentation, and this very self-conscious break from tradition.
The famous phrase being,
Make it new, Ezra Pound. That was the rallying cry for many of them.
and what drove that need to make it new? World War I seems crucial here.
Absolutely crucial. The sheer scale of death, the trauma, It just blew apart so many assumptions about progress, about rationality, about civilization itself. It created this huge gap between the world before the war and the world after.
A kind of profound disillusionment.
Exactly, a prevailing sense of disillusionment among writers. The old ways of telling stories, the old forms, they just couldn't capture this new fractured reality. So there was this conscious push to overturn traditional methods, to find ways to express these new sensibilities.
And this literary shift had deep philosophical roots too, right? Ideas that were challenging how we even understand reality.
Yeah, thinkers like Sigmund Freud. His work suggested our reality is shaped by these basic, often unconscious drives, not just rational thought. That was radical. It questioned the idea of a simple, objective reality we could just observe.
And others built on that.
Right. Ernst Mach argued our subjective experience comes from the interplay of different parts of the mind. And Carl Jung, with his collective unconscious, suggested our impulses come from something deep, primal, shared. These ideas really dismantled the old certainties about a stable, easily knowable self and world.
And Nietzsche, he fits in here too.
He does. Nietzsche's idea that psychological drives, especially the will to power, were more important than just facts, that resonated. It emphasized the subjective, the internal forces shaping how we see things.
And then there's the whole idea of time changing.
Henri Bergson, yeah. He talked about the difference between clock time, scientific, linear, and our actual experience of time, which is subjective, fluid. This directly influenced techniques like stream of consciousness, trying to capture that flow. His focus on élan vital, this life force, and valuing intuition over pure reason. It all fed into this move away from rigid Victorian certainty.
So with all these new perspectives on the mind and reality, modernism kind of rejected that old 19th century realism, the kind that tried to find clear meaning in straightforward descriptions.
Often, yes. Modernists weren't necessarily abandoning realism altogether, but they were aiming for a more real realism, if that makes sense. One that was maybe more fragmented, uncentered, reflecting this new understanding of consciousness.
How did that look in practice?
Well, think about Picasso's painting The Poet from 1911. It's proto-cubist. It shows you multiple viewpoints of the subject all at once, synthesized into one image.
Right, not just one fixed perspective.
Exactly. It forces you, the viewer, to piece it together rather than just giving you one privileged view. It's about acknowledging complexity, multiple angles.
And you see that in writers like Wallace Stevens.
Absolutely. Stevens' realism, it's about revealing truths, plural, not just the truth. He recognizes multiple perspectives. Snow isn't just white. It can be black in a storm or purple, depending on perception. It's about those layers, the subjective reality we create.
And this affected how they used symbols and metaphors, too. Not like the Romantics, who saw clear connections.
Right. Romantics often saw symbols as direct links to some higher truth, like Coleridge calling nature God's eternal language. Modernism, born partly from that disillusionment we talked about, emphasized the struggle, the inscrutability and failure of symbol and metaphor.
Meaning wasn't guaranteed.
Exactly. It was often elusive, fractured. Think of T.S. Eliot's famous metaphor in Prufrock. The evening spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table.
Yeah, that's not exactly pretty.
It's deliberately jarring, unnatural. It reflects that modernist struggle to find meaning, to connect, in a world that felt alienating and broken. It's using metaphor to convey unease, not simple beauty.
So these big philosophical shifts led directly to new ways of writing, new techniques.
Absolutely. Groundbreaking techniques like stream of consciousness, trying to capture that raw, unfiltered flow of thought, interior monologue, giving us direct access to a character's inner voice, using multiple points of view to get closer to psychological reality. It's like they needed new tools to explore this newly complex view of the human mind.
And the lines between genres started to blur.
Definitely. Modernist works often tried to obfuscate the boundaries between genres. Prose became more poetic, poetry more prose-like. Think of Eliot's fragmented narratives, or Virginia Woolf's novels like Mrs. Dalloway, or The Waves. They feel incredibly lyrical, focused on inner experience over straightforward plot.
It sounds like an incredibly fertile time for experimentation.
Yeah.
Modernism wasn't just one single style then.
Not at all. It was this big umbrella covering lots of related, sometimes overlapping movements. Imagism, symbolism, futurism, cubism, surrealism, expressionism, da-da-la. Each with its own focus, but all sharing that drive to break away, to experiment, to make it new.
And right in the middle of all this artistic ferment, another hugely important movement was taking shape. The Harlem Renaissance.
Yes, absolutely vital. The Harlem Renaissance was truly the first major burgeoning of visual, literary, and performing arts by African Americans, and it was deeply concerned with African American life, art, culture, and politics.
Giving voice to experiences that hadn't been centered before in American culture.
Precisely. And its influence was massive, lasting through the rest of the 20th century. It marked this pivotal moment, a powerful assertion of Black artistry and intellect that fundamentally changed American cultural identity and, of course, American literature itself.
So these powerful currents, naturalism's harsh realism, modernism's radical experiments, the Harlem Renaissance's cultural flowering, they set the stage for an explosion of talent. Which brings us perfectly to part two.
Yeah.
The actual writers who define this era. Okay, part two, the voices of the era. Let's start with the groundbreaking novelists. These writers were really pushing boundaries, tackling realism, gender issues, and women empowerment and so on, crafting a new kind of American story.
And first up, a real giant, William Faulkner. His work is just immersive. He uses this rich, complex, almost Baroque style full of stream of consciousness to dive deep into the psychology of his characters and the history of the American South.
He created this whole world, didn't he? Yoknapatawpha County.
He did, this mythical Mississippi community, and through novels like The Sound and the Fury, As I Lay Dying, Light in August, The Hamlet, he chronicles its life, its transformations, its deep-seated issues.
What he was like?
Well, he depicted the transformation and the decadence of the South, often dominated by this heavy sense of guilt going back to the American Civil War and the appropriation of Indian lands. You feel that history weighing on the present. And later, works like Go Down, Moses, and Intruder in the Dust really foregrounded his concern with the incredibly troubled role of race. He didn't shy away from the complexities.
Then there's Ernest Hemingway. So different stylistically, but equally iconic. He really captured that existential disillusionment of the lost generation, right?
Absolutely. Especially in his early work, The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms, that feeling of being adrift after the war, searching for meaning. He conveyed it with this incredibly spare, impactful prose, that famous iceberg theory, you know?
Right, where most of the meaning is below the surface.
Exactly. But his views did evolve. The Spanish Civil War was a turning point. It led him to believe more in collective action to solve social problems.
Which we see in books like For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Right, and To Have and Have Not. Some argue these are maybe less effective stylistically than his earlier work, but they show a definite shift in his thinking, a more political engagement.
And he had that late resurgence too, with The Old Man of the Sea, technically just outside our period in 1952, but it brought him back. And A Movable Feast, that Paris memoir, is still so beloved.
Such vivid snapshots of that time. Then completely different again, you have F. Scott Fitzgerald, the voice of the Jazz Age.
Glittering, but also tragic somehow.
Yes, exactly. His novels brilliantly captured the era, the focus on American history, illusion and reality, wealth, youth, maturity, beauty, and economic classes. He saw the dazzling surface, but also the emptiness beneath.
The Great Gatsby obviously is the masterpiece,
Yeah.
that critique of the American dream.
Timeless. But his other novels, too. This Side of Paradise, The Beautiful and Damned, Tenders the Night, even The Unfinished, The Love of the Last Tycoon, they all explore that chase for elusive dreams, that intoxication with wealth and youth, and the often heartbreaking consequences.
And then John Steinbeck, giving voice to a very different America.
Yes, the voice of the working class, the land. His focus was consistently on land, social problem, environmental ethics, father-son and friend relationship, and Cold War later on. He had this deep empathy for people struggling against harsh conditions.
Of Mice and Men, The Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah.
Just iconic depictions of the Depression era, the migrant experience.
Absolutely powerful. He gave dignity to ordinary lives facing extraordinary hardship, showing their resilience. It's no wonder he won the Nobel Prize in '62. He connected social commentary with such deeply felt human stories.
But it wasn't just these sort of big four. The era was full of other crucial voices too.
So many. We absolutely have to talk about Zora Neale Hurston. Her novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, is just a masterpiece of African American literature. Lyrical, full of life, exploring Black womanhood and self-discovery.
And her use of dialect was groundbreaking, wasn't it?
Incredibly authentic and powerful. Plus her autobiography, Dust Tracks on a Road, and other novels like Jonah's Gourd Vine. She was a major force in the Harlem Renaissance and beyond.
And Claude McKay, another key Harlem Renaissance figure.
Right. His novel, Home to Harlem, was actually a bestseller, offering this really vibrant, unvarnished look at Harlem life. He challenged stereotypes and explored Black experience with real honesty in his work.
What about Sinclair Lewis? He won the Nobel Prize quite early, didn't he?
He did in 1930. He was famous for his sharp, often satirical critiques of American middle-class life. Novels like Main Street and Babbitt really dissected the conformity and hypocrisy he saw in small towns and business culture.
Holding up a mirror to a different kind of American reality.
Definitely. And Nella Larson. Her novels Quicksand and Passing were incredibly insightful, exploring complex issues of racial and sexual identities, particularly the experiences of mixed-race individuals and the phenomenon of passing, really ahead of her time.
And Sherwood Anderson. Winesburg, Ohio is still read a lot.
Yes, a foundational work of early modernism. Those interconnected stories offer such deep psychological insight into the quiet desperation and hidden lives of small-town people. Themes of loneliness, failure, moments of connection, really powerful stuff.
And we should briefly mention others, like Richard Wright, Native Son, is just devastatingly powerful. Edith Wharton, still dissecting high society. And Willa Cather, capturing the spirit of the frontier. It's an incredibly rich period for the novel.
Truly an explosion of talent and perspectives. Okay, so from these big narratives, let's shift focus now to the concentrated power of poetry in this era.
All right, pioneering poets. Poetry was hugely important, tackling everything from nature, romance, mulatto, suppression, gender equality, and issues of war affected people. A real spectrum of human experience.
Definitely. And let's start with Robert Frost. A name everyone knows, but his work goes deep. He explores these fundamental questions of existence, often showing the loneliness of the individual in an indifferent universe with a kind of chilling starkness.
It wasn't just idyllic New England scenery then.
Not at all. Works like North of Boston really highlight the dark background of life in rural New England, the struggles, the isolation, sometimes even degeneration, often sinking into total madness. There's a real psychological depth there.
But also those incredibly famous, almost archetypal poems. The Road Not Taken, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening.
Right, Fire and Ice. He had this amazing ability to tap into universal themes, choice, solitude, our place in nature through these very specific grounded settings, and winning 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry. That's just extraordinary.
Astonishing. Okay, who else? E.E. Cummings is known for playing with form, right?
Oh, absolutely. His experiments were radical, using what some call a synthetic cubist strategy in collections like Tulips and Chimneys, breaking words apart, scattering punctuation, playing with visual layout on the page.
To what end? What was he trying to achieve?
Trying to make language new, to capture feeling and experience more directly, maybe. His poems are often loved because they're full of emotions, sentimentality, of sex, of more or less improper jokes, of elementary lyric insistence. He was unconventional but deeply felt.
And Langston Hughes, we mentioned him with the Harlem Renaissance, a major voice in poetry too.
A central voice, poet and dramatist. Collections like The Weary Blues and poems like Let America Be America Again. They just beautifully articulated the dreams, the struggles, the resilience of African Americans.
Themes similar to his plays.
Very much so. The American dream, dignity, racism, wisdom, self-actualization. He gave this powerful lyrical voice to his community's experience, making it both specific and universal, just essential reading.
Okay, and Wallace Stevens. His focus was different again.
Yes, very philosophical. His main subject was the relationship between imagination and reality, how we perceive the world, how we create meaning through our imagination. He grappled with the sense of nature's significance, but often emphasized the power of the mind to shape our reality.
More abstract, maybe.
Often, yes. Poems like 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird from Harmonium, or later work in The Auroras of Autumn. Deep, complex, exploring the act of perception itself. He won a Pulitzer later, too, for his collected poems.
And briefly, others like William Carlos Williams.
Yes. Williams, with his focus on the ordinary, the American vernacular, finding beauty in everyday objects and language. He also won a Pulitzer. And Hilda Doolittle, or H.D., a key figure in imagism, known for that very precise, clear, intense imagery in poems like those in Sea Garden. Really influential.
So from the intimacy of poetry, let's broaden out again to the public stage, the evolving American stage. Drama and playwrights.
Okay, theater. The early 20th century stage had its stars the Barrymores, Laurette Taylor, Eva Le Gallienne. Big names, big productions.
But things changed. especially with the Great Depression.
Dramatically, theater started taking on more social roles. Plays began reflecting the struggles of immigrants, the unemployed. It became a space for social commentary, not just escapism.
And the government actually stepped in.
Yes, with the Federal Theater Project. Part of the New Deal. It was huge. It helped to promote theater and provide jobs for actors during really tough times. And they didn't shy away from controversial stuff.
Like what?
They staged Sinclair Lewis's It Can't Happen Here, a warning about fascism in America. And Mark Blitzstein's pro-union opera, The Cradle Will Rock. Very political, very engaged work.
But not everyone liked that direction.
No, some producers, like Brock Pemberton, thought theater should provide comic entertainment, an escape. And his comedies were successful too. So you had this tension, this debate about what theater's role should be in society.
And alongside this, a really important development, the rise of black theater. Where did that begin?
Well, the roots are complex, going back to 19th century minstrel shows, initially performed by white actors in blackface, which is obviously deeply problematic. But after the Civil War, black performers entered the field, leading eventually to black musicals written, produced, and acted entirely by blacks by the turn of the century, a real reclaiming of the form.
Important first steps.
Crucial ones. The first known play by a black American writer was James Brown's King Shotaway back in 1823. Then William Wells Brown's The Escape in 1858 was the first published black play. But a real breakthrough was Angelina W. Grimke's Rachel in 1916, the first real success of a black dramatist, tackling the impact of racism head-on.
And the Harlem Renaissance was key here, too.
Absolutely. Black theater flourished during the Harlem Renaissance. You had experimental groups, black theater companies popping up in Chicago, New York, D.C. The Ethiopian Art Theater helped launch Paul Robeson's career.
Milestones on Broadway.
Garland Anderson's Appearances in 1925 was the first play by a black author on Broadway. And Langston Hughes's Mulatto in 1935 became the first Broadway hit by a black playwright. Big moments.
And the Federal Theater Project helped here, too.
Yes, it was a vital training ground for blacks, nurturing talents like Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee. By 1940, with groups like the American Negro Theater, black theater was really firmly established, setting the stage for even more powerful work later on. Post-WWII, black theater became even more progressive, more radical, more militant, reflecting the civil rights movement and seeking a distinct black aesthetic separate from white cultural norms. It was a dynamic evolution.
Now, the really big names, the giants of American drama. Let's start with Eugene O'Neill. He seems foundational.
Absolutely foundational. He's seen as the first American dramatist to regard the stage as a literary medium, the only American playwright to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. He believed theater could be a serious forum for the presentation of serious ideas.
And he really dominated Broadway for a long time.
For over 20 years, he set the pace. His plays were intense, exploring deep psychological and familial conflicts, often with a tragic weight. Masterpieces like Desire Under the Elms, Morning Becomes Electra, The Iceman Cometh.
And he won Pulitzers, too.
Multiple times. For Beyond the Horizon, Anna Christie, Strange Interlude. Plus groundbreaking experimental plays like The Emperor Jones and The Hairy Ape, and many powerful one-act plays, he just transformed American drama.
Then there's Tennessee Williams, another huge name known for that Southern Gothic feel.
Yes, another Pulitzer winner. His plays delve into these fragile, emotional lives, often in the decaying South. The Glass Menagerie, A Streetcar Named Desire.
Absolute classics.
Classic. And Summer and Smoke, too. He explored memory, desire, illusion, the vulnerability of the human spirit with such poetic language and psychological depth. His female characters are particularly unforgettable.
And Arthur Miller, often seen as the conscience of the era.
One of the greatest American playwrights of the 20th century, absolutely. He tackled big themes. The American dream, social responsibility, the pressures of capitalism.
Death of a Salesman, just monumental.
A towering critique, exploring that loss of identity, the inability to accept change, but also plays like All My Sons about the consequences of past actions and the man who had all the luck. He consistently engaged with the moral questions of his time.
We should also mention Susan Glaspell, a feminist voice.
A very daring feminist writer, yes, known for her views on justice and morality. She won a Pulitzer for Allison's House, but her earlier one-act play Trifles is maybe even more famous.
Why is Trifles so significant?
It's this incredibly subtle portrayal of women's insights being dismissed by men, how they piece together a crime through observing Trifles' domestic details the men overlook. It's a brilliant commentary on gender roles and perception.
And Langston Hughes again as a dramatist.
Right, can't forget his impact on stage. Mulatto was a hit, and his plays explored those key themes: American dream, dignity, racism, even even sexuality, with that same powerful voice he brought to his poetry.
Okay, what an incredible landscape. We've covered novels, poetry, drama. This pivotal half-century was just teeming with literary innovation and social commentary. Now let's really zoom in. Let's do a deep dive into one specific work that seems to capture so much of this era's anxiety and continues to feel incredibly relevant.
Right. We're turning now to George Orwell's 1984, published right at the end of our period, June 8th, 1949. It's just the classic literary example of political and dystopian fiction.
And its impact was just immediate, wasn't it? The term Orwellian itself.
Entered the lexicon almost instantly. And all those concepts, Big Brother, doublethink, thought police, thought crime, newspeak, even 2 + 2 = 5. They became shorthand for talking about totalitarian control, surveillance, manipulation of truth.
Did Orwell see it just as fiction?
He called it a satire, a warning about the perversions to which a centralized economy is liable. But crucially, he said he believed something resembling it could arrive. He wasn't just playing with ideas. He was deeply concerned about the real-world trends he saw.
And you just have to think about how often those terms still pop up today, right? In discussions about government, technology, media. It shows how much the book still resonates, how relevant those warnings feel. So let's step into that world, the chilling world of Oceania. Where are we exactly?
We're in a nightmare future, specifically Airstrip 1, that's formerly Great Britain. It's now just a province of this huge totalitarian superstate, Oceania, which is locked in perpetual war with one of 2 other superstates. Constant conflict is the norm.
And who's in charge?
The party. Their ideology is Ingsoc, that's newspeak for English socialism, and looming over everything is Big Brother. He's the dictatorial leader, supposedly, supported by this intense cult of personality. But is he even real? We never know for sure. He's more this all-seeing symbol of power.
And how does the party maintain control?
Through omnipresent government surveillance, primarily via telescreens, those two-way TVs that watch and listen constantly, plus hidden cameras, microphones everywhere, and then there's the Ministry of Truth.
Which is anything but truthful.
Exactly. Its job is historical negationism and constant propaganda, rewriting the past, spreading lies. It's designed to crush individuality and independent thinking. They even make people unpersons, erase them from history entirely. It's about controlling reality itself. And into this nightmare walks Winston Smith, our protagonist.
Tell us about him.
He's 39, an outer party member, so sort of middle management. He works at the Ministry of Truth, ironically, rewriting historical records himself. But secretly, he hates the party, dreams of rebellion. He knows he's a thought criminal just for thinking these things.
And his rebellion starts small.
Very small. Buying an illegal diary to write down his thoughts. A huge risk. Then he begins this forbidden affair with Julia. She hates the party too, but more for restricting her personal freedom. She's described as politically apathetic, really. Their secret meetings are these tiny pockets of defiance.
But they get drawn deeper.
Yeah, Winston encounters O'Brien, an inner party official. Winston desperately wants to believe O'Brien is part of the Brotherhood, this mythical underground resistance led by the supposed archenemy, Emmanuel Goldstein.
But O'Brien isn't what he seems.
Not at all. O'Brien gives Winston Goldstein's supposed book the theory and practice of oligarchical collectivism, which seems to explain everything. But it's all a setup. O'Brien reveals himself as a core member of the Thought Police. It was a false flag operation all along, designed to trap people like Winston.
And then comes the Ministry of Love.
Yeah, the place where they break you. Winston and Julia are captured. Winston undergoes brutal, systematic torture overseen by O'Brien himself. The goal isn't just to get a confession, it's to completely annihilate his independent thought, to make him internalize the party's reality. O'Brien even reveals the party read Goldstein's book. Power is the only goal.
And the final stage is Room 101.
Room 101, where you confront your absolute worst fear. For Winston, it's rats. And under that ultimate terror, he breaks completely. He screams for them to do it to Julia instead. He denounces Julia, betraying the one thing he thought was pure.
And after that?
He's released, essentially brainwashed. He meets Julia again, briefly. They both admit they betrayed each other. The love is gone, replaced by indifference. And in the final devastating lines, Winston sees a news report about a military victory, feels a surge of emotion, and realizes he finally accepts that he loves Big Brother. Game over. The rebellion is utterly crushed. But there's that curious little bit at the end, the epilogue, an appendix called Principles of Newspeak.
Right, written in this very dry academic style. What's the significance of that?
It's debated. Some critics see it as a tiny spark of hope. because it's written in standard English in the past tense, discussing newspeak as a historical phenomenon.
Implying it didn't ultimately succeed.
That's the argument. That maybe it implies the collapse of the party sometime after 1984 because newspeak failed to become dominant. It's controversial, but some read it as a subtle hint that such total control might not be sustainable forever. A very faint happy ending if you squint hard.
Fascinating. Okay, let's unpack Orwell's real-world inspirations. It's pretty clear he wasn't just pulling this out of thin air.
No, not at all. The book was heavily based chiefly on communism, particularly his understanding of the Stalinist government ruling British society conceptually. But he also drew a lot from the censorship and propaganda in Nazi Germany. He saw the patterns in totalitarian regimes of his time.
Like the 2+2=5 thing? That was real?
Disturbingly, yes. It was an actual Communist Party slogan from the second five-year plan in the Soviet Union, pushing ideology over basic fact. Orwell saw that absurdity and understood its terrifying implications for truth.
And the way Oceania switches enemies instantly.
That directly mirrors the Soviet Union's changing relations with Nazi Germany. They went from enemies to allies with the 1939 Pact, and the Soviet press just flipped overnight. Orwell saw that manipulation of reality firsthand.
And the characters seem based on real figures, too.
Yeah.
Goldstein is Trotsky.
Looks very much like it. Exiled figure, critical book, even the propaganda associating him with animal imagery. The parallels with Trotsky are strong.
And Big Brother.
Big Brother, with the mustache, the omnipresent posters. It clearly evokes the cult of personality built up around Joseph Stalin. And the constant focus on production figures in Oceania, that mirrors the Soviet glorification of Stakhanovite heroes of socialist labor.
The torture methods, too.
Yeah, the descriptions of torture in the Ministry of Love strongly echo accounts of the procedures used by the NKVD, Stalin's secret police, the beatings, deprivation using specific fears, and the thought police arresting people for just saying the wrong thing. That was standard NKVD practice.
And the show trials.
Exactly. The fake confessions of characters like Rutherford, Aronson, and Jones mirror the infamous Moscow show trials of the 1930s, where old Bolsheviks confessed to impossible crimes under duress.
And Winston's job, rewriting history, making people unpersons.
Directly based on Soviet censorship, people who fell out of favor were literally airbrushed from group photographs and removed references to them in books and newspapers, like the example of Beria being cut from the Great Soviet Encyclopedia. Orwell knew exactly what he was writing about. Even small details, like the slogan, "Our New Happy Life" from the telescreens, echoes Stalin's 1935 line, "Life has become better, comrades. Life has become more cheerful." It's that chilling propaganda veneer over a brutal reality.
But it wasn't only the Soviet Union, right? His experiences in wartime Britain played a role.
Definitely. The descriptions of bombed-out London, the random bombing of Airstrip 1 that came directly from his experience of the Blitz and the V-weapon attacks in 1944-45.
And Ministry of Truth?
He based that on his time working at the BBC's Overseas Service, which was controlled by the Ministry of Information during the war. He saw propaganda machinery up close.
And Room 101, that was a real place.
Apparently, yes. It was named after a conference room at BBC Broadcast House that he particularly disliked. Makes it even creepier.
You can also see themes from his earlier books.
Sure, books like A Clergyman's Daughter have similar plots involving surveillance and oppression. And Coming Up for Air nostalgically celebrates the freedoms that are completely destroyed in 1984. It's like a before and after picture. And it's important to remember his own politics. Ingsoc, English socialism in the novel, is a horrifying perversion of his cherished socialist ideals. He was a democratic socialist. Oceania was his warning against totalitarianism, hijacking socialist ideas, something he wrote about in essays like The Lion and the Unicorn.
And other literary echoes. It wasn't written in a vacuum.
No, it definitely owes a debt to earlier dystopian works like Zamyatin's We, which Orwell reviewed, and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
Any other influences?
Some scholars point to Borges' story, Pelon, Ukbar, Orbis Tertius, from 1940, which also explores creating an artificial world that reshapes language and reality. These ideas about manipulating truth were definitely in the air.
Okay, so drawing on all that, let's talk about the enduring themes that make 1984 still feel so potent today.
One huge theme is nationalism in extremis. Orwell wrote about this in his essay, Notes on Nationalism, and you see it twisted in Oceania.
Now so.
You've got positive nationalism, that irrational, perpetual love for Big Brother. Then negative nationalism, the equally irrational, perpetual hatred for Emmanuel Goldstein, the scapegoat.
And the most chilling kind.
Transferred nationalism. That scene during Hate Week where the enemy changes mid-speech and the crowd just redirects its fury instantly without missing a beat, it shows how manipulated and superficial that loyalty is. It all serves O'Brien's terrifying point. The object of power is power. Full stop.
Which leads to that unforgettable image. The future as a boot stamping on a human face forever.
O'Brien says it directly. It's not just about pain, it's about the complete eradication of human dignity, curiosity, joy. No curiosity, no enjoyment of the process of life. The only thrill left is the intoxication of power, crushing others. It's a vision of absolute, permanent oppression.
And absolute censorship is key to maintaining that. The ministry of truth.
Right. It's not just hiding inconvenient facts, it's actively rewriting the past, purging unpersons, inventing fake statistics, even creating fake heroes like Comrade Ogilvy just to fit the narrative. History becomes completely malleable, whatever the party needs it to be.
All enforced by ubiquitous surveillance.
Constant watching. The telescreens you can't turn off, hidden microphones, mail checks, the thought police, even children encouraged to spy on their parents. Very little true privacy for anyone in the party, especially the outer party.
And the slightest slip, even a facial expression, could mean disaster.
Exactly. Face crime. They monitor everything. The goal is total behavioral control driven by fear of constant observation.
Another tool is poverty and inequality as control mechanisms. Life is deliberately grim for most people.
Yes. Hunger, thirst, disease, and filth are the norms. Ruined cities, shoddy victory brand everything. It keeps people focused on basic survival, too ground down to rebel effectively.
But the inner party lives well.
Oh, yes. Comfortable flats, good food, wine, real coffee, even captured slaves. A stark contrast, highlighting the hypocrisy in the hierarchical structure.
But the proles, the working class, they have more freedom, in a way.
Less surveillance, yes. The party figures they're too ignorant to be a threat, believing the middle class, not the lower class, traditionally starts revolutions. It's a calculated risk. Though Winston still holds out hope that the future belonged to the proles.
Yeah.
But Goldstein's book, or rather the party's book, reviews the strategy. In the long run, a hierarchical society was only possible on a basis of poverty and ignorance. And perpetual war helps by consuming resources, ensuring scarcity, keeping everyone dependent and fearful.
And finally, maybe the most terrifying theme, the war on thought itself.
Going beyond controlling actions to controlling minds. The party rejects the idea that thought does not commit a crime. For them, thought crime is the ultimate transgression.
And they have specialists for this.
O'Brien describes this new kind of scientist, part psychologist, part inquisitor, studying expressions, gestures, using drugs, torture, hypnosis to get inside people's heads to root out dissent before it even manifests as action.
Because, as O'Brien says,
the party is not interested in the overt act. The thought is all we care about. It's about achieving total ideological conformity, destroying the very possibility of independent thought, utter mental domination. Which brings us neatly to that classic comparison. 1984 versus Brave New World. Huxley actually wrote to Orwell about this.
What did Huxley say?
He suggested basically that his own vision in Brave New World was maybe more likely, that future rulers would find it easier to control people by making them love their servitude through pleasure, conditioning, and distraction, rather than Orwell's constant brute force, making control seductive rather than terrifying.
So, two different paths to dystopia.
Exactly. 1984 is control through brutal force, torture, and harsh mind control. Information is scarce and manipulated. Brave New World is control through drugs, hypnosis, genetic conditioning, and pleasurable distractions. Information is overwhelming, creating trivia and passivity.
Pain versus pleasure as the tool.
In essence. And the debate continues today. Which vision feels more relevant now? You could argue we see elements of both. Maybe Huxley's vision feels more dominant in consumerist Western societies, while Orwell's feels more applicable to authoritarian regimes.
And the fact that 1984 sales jump whenever there are new concerns about surveillance or political language?
Like after the NSA leaks or the alternative facts comment,
Yeah.
It shows just how deeply embedded Orwell's warnings are in our consciousness. The book remains this vital touchstone for anxieties about power, truth, and freedom.
Well, that brings us towards the end of our deep dive into this incredible, turbulent half-century of American literature, 1900 to 1950. It was just so dynamic.
Absolutely. A time when truth itself felt up for grabs, and writers responded with astonishing creativity and insight, grappling with what it meant to be American in a world changing at breakneck speed.
We saw naturalism's stark realism, modernism's radical experiments, the cultural awakening of the Harlem Renaissance, all paving the way for figures like Faulkner, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Steinbeck, Hurston, O'Neill, Miller. The list goes on.
And finishing with Orwell's 1984, published right at the cusp, 1949, it serves as this powerful, chilling synthesis of the era's anxieties about power, control, and the very nature of reality. A warning that, clearly, still resonates.
Hopefully this exploration has given you, our listener, a real shortcut to understanding this crucial period and its lasting impact. We've tried to hit those key insights and maybe some surprising connections.
Showing how literature isn't just stories, it's this vital way we process and understand ourselves and the massive shifts in the world around us.
So as a final thought to leave you with, thinking about this constant tension between truth and power and how our own world keeps changing, what specific literary work from any time period gives you the most profound sense of understanding, or maybe even just a little bit of hope as you navigate the complexities we face today?
Something to ponder. And we really do encourage you to keep exploring these works. There are so many resources available now, online lectures, great analysis sites, or just picking up the books themselves. That journey of discovery, those aha moments, they're definitely worth pursuing.